Good evening, everybody. My name is Laura Ebke. I am the chair of the Libertarian Pragmatist Caucus, and I am joined tonight by my co-host in this adventure, Andy Craig, who is our political director. We're also joined tonight, very honored to be joined tonight by our 2020 Libertarian Party presidential candidate, Joe Jorgensen. How are you doing tonight, Joe?
Hey, great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So I'm going to turn things over to Andy here for a few minutes, let him ask a few questions, and then we'll start seeing what else comes in on the comments. You should be able to make comments on our Libertarian Pragmatist Caucus page or via our YouTube site. So there's some other little things that some of the groups require, but you can certainly do it through our page or through our YouTube page. So Andy, go right ahead.
Thanks, Laura. I think most of our audience has a pretty good idea who Dr. Jorgensen is, but as Laura mentioned, she was our 2020 presidential candidate, and we were extra pleased because she was also our caucus endorsee for the presidential nomination. Before that, she was the 1996 vice presidential candidate with Harry Brown and has run for office a couple other times, and is a psychology lecturer at Clemson University. So, that's, I think, a little bit of intro, but we'll jump right into it. So how have you been? How have you been doing since November, and what have you been up to since the election?
Recovering. I didn't know it was so possible to be so busy. In fact, when I rebooted my computer, my calendar, Google Calendar, came up to September for some reason. And just looking at the week, I thought, oh my gosh, how do we fit so many things in 1 week? Because I was doing up to 9 interviews a day, and that would be on top of meetings. And so sometimes we would be not so many when we were on the road, on the bus, but it loved every minute of it. And it was just so much fun. And I'm just so honored that I was able to represent the party. And again, I appreciate the Pragmatic Caucus for endorsing me.
Excellent. And that's, one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize. They think the presidential nomination is, you get a spotlight and it's, good fun, but it's a lot of work. I know that travel schedule was intense, and the interviews and everything.
Well, there's a Far Eastern saying, the bigger the front, the bigger the back. And so, yes, it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and it was fun to be in the spotlight. So, but you know what? I I'm kind of a hermit anyway, so I never really envied, the Jennifer Lopez or these, Guns N' Roses who go on tour. I thought I would just rather stay home. But now I really appreciate the hard work. And I hear so many stars out there saying, dehydration or exhaustion. And now I understand. But again, I hate to sound like I'm complaining, because like I said, the bigger the front, the bigger the back. It was more fun than I ever could have imagined.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days, Joe. Since the campaign is over, you have been part of a launch of a new organization. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I'm thrilled. Well, it's not exactly new. In fact, during the campaign, some of you may have seen the Let Her Speak campaign. And in fact, I've been asked by several people, so the whole Let Her Speak thing, it seemed like it was almost like you were running 2 separate campaigns. And I said, yeah, that's because it wasn't our campaign. In fact, it started out as a PAC, and we weren't even allowed to coordinate with them. So yes, it was a completely separate effort. And it was by the people with People for Liberty who put that forth. And so after the election, I had actually planned on starting my own organization, but when they asked me to join theirs, I thought, well, this is perfect, because, we can multiply our efforts. There's already an organization there. Dan Fishman, who I respect very much, who was executive director of the Libertarian Party, National Libertarian Party, he's on board. And so it's just so exciting to be on there. And one thing that, the problem with the mainstream media is that the media will somewhat talk about us around the presidential election, and then nobody talks about us for 4 years. And then they'll talk about us again for a little bit, and then not for 4 years. So what we need to do is we really need to keep this momentum going so that people will hear us and know about us. And let me just mention one other thing. Somebody after the election said, a friend of mine, after he went to vote, said to me, I thought only Trump and Biden were running. I saw this other name up there, Joe Jorgensen. Who's he? And so it's going to be my mission with People for Liberty, so that when every American goes to the voting booth, they aren't surprised to see another name other than the two older parties.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things you focused on a lot in campaigning for the nomination, you talked about this, is the idea that the presidential campaign is about advertising the party and growing membership and bringing people into the fold. I can say I worked with Gary on the 2016 campaign, and I like Gary a lot, but that was not his focus. And I mean, we've seen, and I know from Joe Bishop Hinchman, the membership results that have come in. And one of the, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things that I know that was very successful for that was the bus tour. So I'm just going to ask if you know how that came about, and tell us a little bit about the bus tour.
Okay, well, first let me go back and talk about membership. One of my proudest achievements, not just in the Libertarian Party, but my entire life, is that I helped Harry Brown more than double the size of the Libertarian Party. And until this past election, it was the largest growth the Libertarian Party has seen in its history, in its, 50-year history. So I was very proud of that. So I wanted to do the same with this. Now, I don't have the numbers yet. In fact, I'm waiting for them from Steve, because I'm going to the Wisconsin State Convention this weekend and I want to have those numbers. But yes, Joe Bishop Henchman told me that it was successful and we did grow the party. Now, as far as the bus tour, I give complete credit to Jess Mears. I've had a lot of people ask, well, geez, did you get to keep the bus after they went through that trouble to paint your face on it? But she understood, and a lot of people don't, that they actually wrap it with plastic, kind of like shrink wrapping it. And I kind of joked on the campaign. I felt a little bad because here we are with our under $3.5 million campaign, driving around in this $1 million tour bus, which, by the way, was part of Luke Combs. He's, I guess, a country star. Maybe I shouldn't admit this because it's supposed to be the largest format, so I don't want to alienate the country and Western fans. But anyway, it was one of his tour buses. And so here we are riding around in style on our little $3 million, while Gary Johnson and his $12 million is driving around in their little RV. But what had happened was, with COVID, of course, the venues were all closed, the musicians weren't touring. And so the bus companies were like, well, we'd rather make a little bit of money than a lot. So we got a great deal on that bus. And it would be nice to think that the campaign in 2024 could raise enough money to afford the bus, but that it might be a while.
So, Joe, we are getting a number of comments and questions and all sorts of other things. So I'm going to throw some of these up here and allow you to comment on some of them.
Okay.
Bull Johnson says, what do you think would be key to winning seats in Congress for Libertarians? He's running for Minnesota 07, and what should be a winnable race, and any advice you might have would be appreciated.
Okay, first of all, I ran for Congress in '92 and did not win, so perhaps I'm not the one to ask. But I would suggest following AOC's playbook, because she ran for a seat that they thought nobody could win other than the incumbent, because the incumbent was entrenched in the Democratic Party, and yet she managed to oust him. And part of the way that she did it was just knocking on doors for everybody, because a congressional district is large, but it's small enough that you can do the personal touch. And I think if you go around and you talk to people and meet them, people, if they meet you and they see that you're a real person and that you take the time and trouble to go meet them and knock on the door, a lot of people would just vote for you because they say, you know what, that candidate cared enough to come around and take the time to try to meet me. And also, and I'm not just saying this because it's your podcast, but I think you need to have a practical message. And that's what I kept stressing for the nomination, that in the 1970s and 80s, and I did the same thing, by the way, it's my money, it's my body, it's my money, it's my body, you can't have it, go away. The old libertarian message just doesn't work. Talking about, and by the way, yes, I came to the party because I believe those things. Yes, I came to the party for liberty and freedom and power, but these are all abstract terms that don't mean anything to the average voter. The average voter just wants to live their life, and a lot of libertarians forget this, and especially people running for office, because that politics is their whole world. And as libertarians, we kind of see it as kind of a contact sport. It's our entertainment, but most people just want to go to work, they want to watch football, they want to have, go to parties with friends, raise their kids, go to their kids' t-ball games. Politics isn't in their forefront. So you've got to talk about what they want, what they're concerned about. And, and again, I may be stepping on toes here, but if you do what I did, and by the way, I was guilty of this. You looked at my old brochures. I was for freedom, but you tell people I'm running for office because I'm for freedom. Their reply is, well, first of all, a glazed look in their eyes, and then they say, "But we're the freest country on earth." Like, I'm not looking for freedom. I want to be able to pay my health care. I want my kids to get a good education. So be a salesperson and talk about what they want to talk about.
That's a really good point. And I think messaging is something, and we can talk about this a little bit, but I think messaging is something that we sometimes fail at, or don't do well at least in the Libertarian Party, that we have a tendency to think that if we push hard enough, if we're just radical enough, that people are going to come flying our way, right? Because it makes so much sense to us. And I think you're exactly right that, we need to figure out a way to message those ideals in ways that are palatable to the people who haven't heard the message before.
Yeah, exactly. And Laura, you said the magic word radical. I'd like to point out, I was very proud of the fact that of the remaining people running for the office, running for the nomination, I scored, I tied for the highest rating from the Radical Caucus. Now, they didn't have an outright endorsement like you guys did. They just rated people A, B, C, D. And I tied for the highest rating with the Radical Party. So you absolutely can stick to your principles and present it in a practical manner. And I didn't sell out. I never said, nope, let's just legalize marijuana. That's all. You're right. Guns are dangerous. Let's get rid of, the assault rifles. I never backed down on any of our principles. I just presented them in a practical manner. And really, the radical ideas are the most practical. That's what our country was founded on.
Well, there's sort of a notion of, direction. And I think Harry Brown originally talked about this, or did in one of his books anyhow, about, we need to be directional and not, destinational in our approach to things, that we know where we want to go, but, you don't get there magically overnight. And sometimes you have to take it one step at a time. The old, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I mean, we're sort of in that position. And when you have a mass of the public that has never heard the message that we have in the way that we present it to each other, we have to be really careful about how we. And how we message to folks.
Yep.
Okay, so Mark asks, Here's the big question. Any chance you'll run again in the future for anything?
Well, yeah.
Desiree asks too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. We'll see. And what I've been telling people is, well, first of all, 2024 is a long ways away. But I do not think that just because you get nominated once means that you should automatically get the nomination again. I think the only times somebody has run a second time, they got it, which was Harry Brown and Gary Johnson. So I don't think that I should automatically get it as you know, even though that's what it looks like in the past. If I were to get it, it would be only because I earned it, because I grew the movement. But regardless if I run or not, I'm growing the movement because, again, we can't just let the media define us every 4 years. We have got to get bigger. We've got to grow the movement. And by the way, while I'm very proud of the fact that I increased the membership of the party, even if you don't join the party, even if people don't join, if they just listen to us and say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I've had it with the other parties. I'm voting for you. What we need is to get out there.
Lots of comments here about how awesome you know, radicals and pragmatics together can be, and how it's two sides of the same coin. Desiree
Oh,
says,
yeah. Do you mind if I interrupt? Because I saw Kate, that was Caitlin Cloven.
Yeah.
She was our social media person. Thanks to Caitlin. Partially thanks to Caitlin, I got the nomination to begin with. She joined us in January, and through May, a lot of people have said you can thank Caitlin for the nomination because she did a great job with your social media. So thank you, Caitlin. And yes, I absolutely agree, because that's what I tried to do at stops. In fact, this kind of got to be a joke where Kate Prather, who traveled with us, when somebody would ask me about the Second Amendment, she would, with her microphone say, "So, Joe, rumor has it you have an AK-47. Is that true?" And then I'd say, "As a matter of fact, I do." And then everybody'd clap. But then I would go on to point out that I've actually never shot it. The only reason I bought it was because Bill Clinton told me I couldn't have one. So I immediately went out and bought one before the law was passed. And, politicians just haven't learned, when you tell people they can't have something, they just want it more. So, yeah. Which they should know, since that's how they act.
There you go. So there are several other. Okay, here we go.
Before you jump into the next one real quick, I did see we had a comment from Joe Bishop Hinchman, our national chair, with some numbers. LP paid membership stood at 21,199 in November of 2020. That's 31% growth over 2019. And as he notes, 1 in 90 Americans voted for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Joe. Yes.
Joe's always got the numbers at the ready. That's great. And here's somebody who says that let's see.
And by the way, yes, Joe is a numbers guy. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take a minute to thank him. I really think there's a good chance we would not have been on all 50 states if it hadn't been for him. He was so diligent in keeping track of the deadlines of different states. And there were a lot of late night phone calls. Oh my gosh, we got to turn in this paperwork. And same with Tara DeSisto, who personally drove hours and hours in Maine to turn in the last few ballots that got us on the ballot. So I really think it's important that we be on the ballot in all 50 states for every presidential election, because then we can say we're more like the Democrats and Republicans, and we're not lumped so much with the Green Party and the others. In fact, this last time around was very different from when I ran in 96. In 96, I kept getting questions. How are you different than the Green Party? Or what is it like being a third party? That's not the way it was. Every single interviewer asked me about the Democrats and Republicans. I think there were a couple people doing third party stories who asked me about third parties, but that was it. And by the way, some people have asked me why I wasn't in the third party debates. And that's why, because, reporters want news. They want to report on something that's new. Now, I had my website up, we had all of our issues, and that's not really news. But if I'm in a debate, now that's news. So that means if I'm in a debate with the Green Party and the other one, now for the next couple of weeks, all I do is get questions about the debate, And then the Libertarian Party is compared with the Green Party, which they shouldn't be, because we are on a completely different level. And if you look at the numbers of my being interviewed, because I had an interview that day, wonderful interviewer from Reason Magazine, compared those numbers with the third party debate, it blows it out of the water. Hardly anybody watched the third party debate. It would just be us giving credence to them instead of them helping us.
Okay, so
I'm with you on that one. I agree on that call.
So here's a question from that's a little controversial. So hold on.
Good. I like controversy.
Okay. So this is from Steve Sanderson, and Steve is he's down in Florida, but he's from Nebraska originally. So he's a good guy. But it's an interesting question, and I know that's something that you heard from time to time, even during the campaign, the Black Lives Matter and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, I only met with one Black Lives Matter leader. And also I did go to Minneapolis. But I believe if you were to read my interviews of major publications that I was interviewed by, or listen to the radio shows or podcasts or whatever it is, I think you'll see that I did talk about the lockdowns and masks. In fact, every chance I got, I would either use masks or education as an example of, this is why we need to get government out of our lives. Let us make our own choices. Right now, we're pitted against our neighbors. We all have to go to the voting booth and we all have to vote. Do we wear masks, or do we have school prayer in school, or whatever? So I would use that as an example of why we need to be allowed to make our own decisions.
Do you suppose this is one of those instances where social media sort of distorts the reality?
Yes.
Yep. Because the Black Lives Matter instance where you met once or whatever seems to have really taken hold in some circles, and
Yeah, and let me mention this. I don't know why people were upset. It was almost as though they were afraid I was going to be converted to Marxist. I wish they had had a little more faith that I'm a capitalist through and through. But the one person who I did meet with, wonderful guy, oh my gosh, I spent the whole day with him. He was a Black preacher who had been in prison. And we just sat there and talked. And by the way, he was my guest at the local state convention. And I asked him if he knew that the bus that Rosa Parks was asked to sit on the back of sit in the back of the bus. I asked him if he realized that was a government-run, government-owned bus. And he said, no, I had no idea. And I said, if you think about it, what if Uber tried to do that? If they tried to discriminate against the best 60% of their ridership, they'd go bankrupt as well as they should. And also because he had been in prison, I told him, I said, well, the Libertarian Party feels very strongly that just because you go to prison does not mean that you lose your right to self-defense. And if you've done your time, then when you get out, you should be able to own a gun. And he was like, really? Like he did, I mean, it was almost like his eyes were spinning, because that was just so foreign to anything he had ever heard. And I said, yeah, if you are so dangerous that you shouldn't have a gun, then maybe you should still be in prison. But if you've done your time, if you have served your sentence, then there's, you shouldn't be a sitting duck for other people to hurt you. And he was really liking a lot of these ideas. So the way I looked at it is, Black Lives Matter agree with us that there is a problem. So we both agree that there's a problem with government and that there's a problem with the system. It's just that our solutions are different. So if I can talk to somebody who already thinks there's a problem, now maybe I have a chance to make some inroads. If I talk to somebody who says, yeah, I think government's fine, government's not too big, how am I going to get anywhere with that person? So if you're selling cars, sell a car to somebody who believes that they need one.
Yeah. Steve said, thanks for answering the question. Here's a question from, or a comment from Pete. We all need to follow your approach to non-libertarians on wedge issues such as scary black guns or marijuana legalization, as well as major topics like the economy and foreign wars. And that really goes back to the notion, doesn't it, that that you have to meet people where they are before you can bring them along with you.
Yep, exactly. And I think that was one of the advantages of me teaching at a major college, that, because we always hear about wild-eyed libertarians. It's like, okay, well, here's somebody who teaches at an almost top 20 university, who has a PhD, who has a husband and kids. Maybe this isn't so wild-eyed. So it lends credence to it.
Andy, you have anything you want to?
Sure. Well, we touched a little bit on kind of the issues. When you were out campaigning and meeting people at rallies and such, what were some of the most common issues that people were interested in, or was kind of motivating them to show up at a Libertarian presidential candidates event?
Well, I have to admit, and I owe an apology to the LPCaucus. I was surprised at how many people were so excited about the Federal Reserve, about getting rid of the Federal Reserve. I thought that was something that only hardcore libertarians were interested in. Now, maybe it was mostly hardcore libertarians I was talking to, but I was really surprised at the response that I got for that. And also, I was impressed by how many veterans came out. And so many veterans came out saying, I'm just not treated right, and I've got PTSD, or I just had 3 friends who were killed over the who committed suicide over the last year. So a lot of veterans with veterans issues, and it's really awful how our government has treated them, and they shouldn't be veterans in the first place, or most of them. Most of them should have never had to go through this.
Absolutely. And that's something, we've seen in the news here recently with, supposedly the can got kicked down the road a little, just a few more months, and then we're finally getting out of Afghanistan. This war would just about be old enough to drink.
Yeah, we heard that from Trump, though, too, didn't we? By the way, I wrote an article of why neither Democrats nor Republicans are going to get us out of war, and it's because of the military-industrial complex. I mean, if you look at the amount of donations, and I got to admit, sometimes I get billions and trillions and millions mixed up. It's like, billion here, a billion there. It adds up to be real money, right? Was it 16 billion every year that they donate to campaigns, federal campaigns? Whatever the number was, it was obscene. And once they're in their pocket, and I wasn't so much one of these orange mad bad people with Trump. I understand why people voted for Trump, and I really do think that he was sincere in trying to cut back on military, but he didn't realize what he was up against. And he said, let's drain the swamp. People, we talk, and here's something that I can see as somebody who's in psychology. We talk about abstract things like, oh, let's get rid of the swamp. And we think that's good. Well, but then Trump gets in there and he sees, what? These people in the swamp, these are all leaders of industry, people I know, maybe friends I went to, and then all of a sudden you're meeting real people who are making lots of money, who you have connections with. And now all of a sudden it's not so swampy anymore. It's real people who you have a connection with. And so, and that's what I would tell people is, here's my advantage. I don't have a connection with anybody. I'm a teacher. I don't have any friends in high places. I have no problem putting them all out of jobs.
So Jared asks a risky question here, because there's some discussion going on here in the comments. But
yes.
What was your favorite stop on your bus tour?
Well, can I first answer the question about my favorite stop in the campaign, but it wasn't on the bus?
Sure.
Alaska. I have never been to Alaska before, and I loved it. And the campaign worked really hard on coming up with a great Alaska voter guide, explaining how Alaska, rugged individualism. Our first state senator was from Alaska. We had a presidential candidate. And I think our pamphlet started with something like, it seems like more than 3,000 miles that separates DC from the individuals of Alaska. So I just loved, the people really do have a libertarian spirit where they are very individualistic. And it's no wonder that that's where our first libertarian state senator was, or state representative was elected, our first elected official. So that high up at a state level. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Now the bus stop, oh my gosh, I would really have to think about, specifically the bus tour. I would have to think about that. There's so many good places.
It was probably Council Bluffs, Iowa, since I was there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I sometimes watch Dateline. That's my nice, like get away from it. And they had a show and they started off and it said Council Bluffs, Iowa, and they panned over the city. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the park right there that I spoke at. And by the way, for all you guys watching, I followed Laura. Laura was a speaker there and she was a tough act to follow.
Well, I was honored to have been asked to come over the river and be there. So, and we had a nice little chat either before or after, or maybe both. I don't remember.
Yes.
So it was, and Jared, of course, wants you to say, I don't know, did you go to Indiana someplace, Indianapolis or someplace? Jared is in Indiana.
Well, and let me mention, and my campaign was brutally honest with me. They told me that the worst speech I gave was in Indiana. And it was, unfortunately, it was probably the biggest crowd I had, but I was on crutches. I re-injured a hockey injury. So I was in excruciating pain the night before. I'd gotten like an hour of sleep and was in such pain I couldn't even get my legs on the bed. I was sleeping with my legs off the bed. And so I went up on the stage in crutches and I tried so hard. I thought I was doing a good job faking it. And the campaign was like, no, you didn't fool anybody. You kind of sucked out there. So I do apologize to the people in Indiana, especially Indianapolis. And if you give me another chance, I'll come back and get a good night's sleep and not be in pain.
420 in attendance in Indiana. That's pretty good, though.
Yeah. Yeah,
nice crowd.
Like I said, it was one of our biggest crowds, and it was my worst performance. Isn't that that's how life works sometimes?
That's the way it works sometimes. Jesse James Welch, I love that name. Veterans issues and the endless wars are a huge reason why he's a libertarian. I don't trust President Biden to bring the troops home, but I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, we all hope he's wrong. But,
I completely agree. I hope I'm wrong too, but we'll see.
Speaking of your hockey injury, that's one of the things I know you talked a little bit about on your personal side is that you play hockey, and Alexander says he heard you played hockey as part of meeting voters in Alaska. Was that?
Yes. Although I played, well, first of all, and playing hockey, that's kind of an overstatement. First of all, I hadn't played in a couple of years because I had an injury. So I hadn't been out on the ice in a while. But they actually had a couple of people, like there was a newspaper, I think, who came out to interview me because they took a picture of me in my hockey gear outside. I think there were maybe a couple of media outlets that actually interviewed me with my hockey jersey on outside the outside, in the pavilion, but outside the rink, with my skates on. Because I was looking at a picture and I thought, well, that's odd. It looks like I'm wearing tennis shoes or something. I dressed nicely for the campaign. Then I realized, oh, ice skates.
So I'm going through these lists. We've probably had more comments on this than we've had on any of the ones that we had before. I'm having trouble keeping up with all of them.
While Laura looks through the comments there, I'll touch on another thing. I think we would be remiss if we did not ask about the bat.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. First of all, I did not get bitten by the bat. It turns out, and by the way, I knew this thanks to watching Inside Edition, that you only, because there was, I don't know if you remember in the news, but there was, I think it was in New York, I'm not sure, but it was in a stadium. There was a game going on and there was a bat loose inside. And so they were telling everybody, okay, if you came in contact with the bat, seek medical attention, because the bat is the only animal that all you have to do is touch the bat and you can get rabies. Whereas like with cats or dogs or raccoons, you have to actually get bitten. So what it, and not to complain about my campaign manager too much, but Steve told me, don't worry, no more 5 a.m. flights, we're going to get your schedule better. And 5 days later, he's picking me up at my house at 5:30, right? So I'd gone out the back door to say goodbye to my cat because she had spent the night outside. And I opened up the back door and all of a sudden it flew into me. And by the way, it flew into my neck. I mean, how stereotypical is that? So it flew into my neck and I was like, get away. And so I knew even if it didn't bite me, even if it didn't bite me, I knew I needed to get medical attention. Now, but I still got on the plane, still went to Pennsylvania, although I asked the campaign team, can we go straight to the hospital, please? Because they were like, oh, don't worry, we'll go to the hospital. We'll hit whatever town at 10 o'clock tonight and we can, take you to the ER then. And I was like, yeah, I think this is one time I'm going to override you guys, because first of all, you have to get your first shot in 24 hours or you could die. But also, have you ever been to an ER at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night? No, I think we need to go now. So, and we went to 4 different emergency rooms on the bus, and it was, poor Seth and Jess, they planned my schedule. So then not only do they have to plan when we arrive and when I speak out of town, now they had to also find the closest emergency room that had the bat vaccine that I could go visit. So, but I do want to mention what was really exciting, and this was kind of towards the beginning. Well, in fact, this was the first time, the first day of the bus. In fact, I got off, I came out of the airport, snapped a picture of the back of the bus before getting into an Uber to go to the hospital. But at the hospital, somebody came in. Well, the nurse came in and said, oh, I want you to meet so-and-so. He's the tech. And I'm like, okay, hi. And she said, I'm just going to give you a shot. And I thought, well, that's odd. Why would she bring in a tech to watch him give me a shot? And then she said, well, he's kind of fangirling you. What he did was he looked on the board, saw the name Joe Jorgensen, and thought, no, it couldn't be. And it was. So he just wanted to meet me. And I know that when you work at a hospital, you can't ask people like for selfies or anything. And so I asked him, I said, would you like I know you're not allowed to ask me, but would you like a selfie with me? And he was like, oh, thank you. So it was really exciting that I'm running into people who knew about the campaign. And in fact, the emergency room doctor in Mississippi, when we were talking, he said, yeah, I know you're really busy. And then the second time he said, I know you're really busy, I said, well, how do you know how busy I am? And he said, well, you're running for president, right? I'm like, how did you know that? So that now maybe I shouldn't say this. I've got one of those high deductible insurance policies that I suggest people buy. So I think it cost me like close to $4,000. It was over $3,000 personal expenses that I had to pay for all these emergency rooms. But you know what? We got a heck of a lot more publicity for that than $3,000. I mean, Newsweek or Time in Europe, they were even writing about it. So.
And Bat Jorgensen was great on Twitter.
Yeah, I love, oh my gosh, the cartoons. It's like, yeah, we don't know if Joe Jorgensen is really a bat, but have you ever seen her and a bat at the same, or, like that kind of stuff.
So let's see. I'm getting some feedback.
I just read that.
There you go. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, Halloween reunion.
So here's an interesting one about the COVID vaccination.
Oh, geez. Yeah, what options do I have? So I'm not an attorney, so I cannot counsel you on that. But let me mention, I'm rather surprised. Clemson University, where I work, they had us fill out a survey asking us if we wanted a vaccine through the university. And they said, if not, why not? And are you getting it? And if you're not getting the vaccine, why not? And I told them I was not getting the vaccine and that, it was for personal/religious reasons. And I was kind of surprised that they went along with that. I would think that, a school would require it. So that's a tough, I don't know, Laura. Andy, can you help me with this question? I don't know what your options are. And I, yeah, I don't know how to answer that one, except this is why we need to have libertarians in office.
Right. And certainly employers, depending on the employer and the nature of their business, I guess they can make the decisions they want, just as they do for all sorts of other things. But I think that on a larger scale, people ought to be able to choose. I mean, I've been vaccinated, and I think that it's for me it was right, but it's not right for everybody, and we just need to make sure that that those who that nobody is discriminated against because of their decision.
Yeah, and what concerns me, and by the way, I had the measles vaccine and all that. I vaccinated my children against, so I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I understand the advantages of it. But on the campaign trail, I literally had thousands of selfies taken with me with no masks. I never got COVID. And so I'm wondering if maybe I had it, but I've got antibodies. And I heard that it's possible that if you've had antibodies and you have the vaccine, that it's not good. So I don't want to take that chance.
Yeah.
And so why should the government make you do it? Or why should an employer make, like if an employer wants to say, okay, give us an antibodies test, maybe, but, this is the problem. When the government gives us a mindset of one size fits all, we all got to do this.
Yeah, I see one comment here. I'm not JMMADFIS. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but they ask about kind of the battle over polling, and how did that go for you, and what experience did you have trying to get included in polls and the arguments you got back from them and all that?
Yeah, it didn't go well at all. In fact, so you have to reach, is it 15% in the poll? They changed it, of course. Okay, first of all, let's step back. The In Power Debate Commission, and it's like People's Front of Judea, the Judeans People Front. I always forget the names of these,
Monty Python.
These debate commissions, the debate commission, the commission to debate, whatever. So the main one, what they do is they say, okay, what number can we pick that's low enough that it looks reasonable, but not so low that other people will reach it. We want it high enough that nobody else will reach it, but it can't look unreasonable. And they've actually changed it depending on what the circumstances are. So with Gary Johnson, he was scoring high enough in the polls that it was looking pretty good. And so this time around, what they did, because they didn't want anybody else in the debate, is they just said, well, we just won't put her in the polls. And again, this is part of why we have to grow the movement, so that there's enough people that they're saying, well, why isn't she or he in the debate? We want to hear this person too. So we have to grow our numbers so that people will think it's as ridiculous as we do that we're not included. Oh, could you back it up? I didn't read the other one quite fast enough.
Yeah. Well, it was okay. Now I'm gonna have to go find it. It was.
Sorry.
It's okay. From Pennsylvania. They went to visit you in Pennsylvania, and you were a great role model for her daughters.
Oh, thank you.
I have trouble finding it. Yes.
So I know I didn't ask you to read it because I knew it was good. I just saw somebody met me, and I thought, what are they saying about me?
Yeah, it was very nice.
Okay,
so Bull asks another question about kind of the rural versus urban issues, and do you think that affects the libertarian fiscal or social message? Which one will be better received?
Well, I do think that it helps to maybe frame your message a little differently. And for instance, especially when I'm in the South and I talk about, wouldn't it be nice if you could choose the kind of education you want? I propose it as, let's say you want prayer in the school and your neighbor doesn't. So I try to frame it with my audience in mind. But if you were in an area where people didn't want prayer, then you could frame it the other way and say, let's say you didn't want prayer in school, but your neighbor did. So, the nice thing is we do have the best answers, and it's just a matter of framing. And let me also add, because we're talking about social and liberal here, when I was a libertarian in the 80s, I would go around and tell people, well, even in the 90s, when I was running for VP or running as VP, I would say, we take the best of both Democrats and Republicans. We take the fiscal freedoms of Republicans and the social freedoms of Democrats. But I don't think you can say that anymore, because now, notice in that third debate, they didn't even talk about fiscal issues. You didn't even hear Donald Trump talking about, after he increased spending the way he did, or how he increased spending. And now we've got the Democrats who are practically fascists with their speech, and everybody has to get vaccinated, everybody has to wear a mask. It's really a shame to see a party who used to stand for individual freedom now be the complete opposite. So I think, first of all, it's kind of hard to frame it as fiscal and social, because now it's just all a big mess. But whenever it's possible, I think it is good to frame it to who you're to customize it to who you're talking to. And I have had people ask me, what's your 2-minute libertarian, elevator speech? And I don't have one. It depends who I'm talking to. It depends on what they want. I consider myself to be a salesperson, and I want to know what they want first.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, living in a rural area, I will say that, talking the libertarian fiscal responsibility talk is more popular than the short social talk, the short social libertarian talk, because it takes more than, it takes more than 2 minutes to get some of the social conservatives, if you will, on board with understanding where we're coming from. There are lots of things like, open borders or immigration issues or whatever. If you've got 30 minutes to talk to somebody, you can sometimes bring them along and okay, I guess I get that. But if you don't have 30 minutes to talk to them, I could show you a whole list of things in my last campaign that they hit me on with mailers that I couldn't respond to. It was the short little sound bites. So I think that you need to tailor as much as you can to your audience. Here is
and Laura, and if you don't mind, Laura, you brought up open borders, and I'd like to respond to that, because that is rather controversial, especially right now. And so again, people, people are afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of uncertainty. They're not necessarily afraid of change, but they're afraid of the uncertainty, and they want safety. And so it's nice if you can somehow show them that we're not coming up with some crazy new plan. And so the way I would phrase it, and by the way, it was really easy for me because 3 of my grandparents were immigrants, which, by the way, that's what Hillary Clinton said. And it was actually a lie. Only one of hers were. But for me, 3 of my grandparents really were immigrants. And so I would go around and talk to people and say, 3 of my grandparents were immigrants at the turn of the last century. And that's what I want to return to, when hardworking people can come here and make a life. And then it's like, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense, because they can see how, the country didn't tip over because we let immigrants in 100 years ago.
Here's that message from Bonnie.
Oh, thank you.
Meeting you in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on the bus tour with her daughters was wonderful. They still talk about it. That's pretty cool.
Oh, well, thank you. I really didn't see all the nice stuff. It wasn't supposed to be self-serving.
No. But I mean, I wanted to make sure that you got the rest of that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bonnie. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming out. And it did make us look better when we had people come out.
and Jane, responding to the bat issue,
Yeah.
So.
But by the way, even though it kind of came into my chin, it actually apparently scratched. No, I mean, it came into my neck. I never felt it on my chin, but of course, I'm like this. But it actually did scratch my chin, and so they had to give me a shot on my chin too, in addition to the usual places.
Wow, that's.
I know. I'm the rabies queen now. I know all this stuff.
Cool. Andy, do we have anything else?
Reginald has something. I've not heard this before, so I have no idea if this is right. But he asked, "Is it true that your dog has a name, but your cat does not?"
Well, so my husband gave our cats names. I'm one of those. I'm kind of a hippie person. In fact, well, can I tell you another short story? When I was teaching online, somebody actually typed into the little box saying she said, hashtag Joe 20. And I said, yeah, I don't talk about politics. And she replied, yeah, I thought you looked like that lady who was running for office. I thought it was a big coincidence. But here's the thing. When I teach, I'm kind of a granola. I don't wear makeup. I put my hair in a ponytail. I wear long cotton dresses and Birkenstocks. So I look completely different. So anyway, kind of along that granola vein, cats are let's say cats are less domesticated than dogs. And to me, they're kind of half wild. And so even though my cats technically have names, I call them Kitty. But yeah, my husband will I'll be saying something about the cat, and my husband will say, which one? And I'll say the black one, instead of calling her by name. But yes, my dog is a wonderful basset hound named Gertrude, and she's awesome. But and my cats technically are called Tuxedo and Tiny, but I just call them Kitty because they're half wild.
What else do we have tonight, Andy? We're coming up on the
I think we're coming up on the pretty much on the end of it here. I guess just where can people sign up and get involved with People for Liberty and follow along with what you're doing?
Yes, please check me out at People for Liberty. I've got a Twitter and a Facebook, and I guess Google People for Liberty. I should have this is brand new. In fact, I'm not even sure I've signed my contract yet. Maybe I have, but I just went to the first board meeting this week, and I'm so excited. So excited to be working with Dan again. So excited to be working with Lauren and the people who came up with the Let Her Speak. So yeah, check out People for Liberty. And it's nonpartisan, although on the homepage, we do say that we're against the old two-party system, which doesn't give people choices. So it's, again, we're trying to grow the movement, not necessarily the specific membership of the Libertarian Party, but we're trying to get the word out there so people aren't surprised when they find another candidate on the ballot.
And that is running across the bottom of the screen right now. I will let folks know also that,
thank you. Okay.
Yeah. I will let folks know also that they can find out more about the LPCaucus events at lpcaucus.org/events. We have another exciting one coming up on Sunday. Justin Amash will be joining us for a little while on Sunday evening. So, we're looking forward to that. We are, maybe you don't know, Joe, but I'll let you know. We have been doing a series of town halls trying to get elected officials and other folks who have held office or run for office involved. And we've had some city councilors and some mayors and Representative Marshall Burt from out in Wyoming. And we're trying to make sure that all those libertarians out there who are interested in running for office get to hear lots of different perspectives on running for office and serving in office and on and on. So, thanks for being a part of this tonight.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I had a lot of fun. And it's nice to talk about fun, kind of LP stuff.
Absolutely. Andy, anything else?
Oh, I was just going to say, I'll see you in Eau Claire this weekend. That's
Oh, you will.
where I
Awesome.
before I moved to DC. That's where I came up in the LP and ran for office a couple times, was Wisconsin. So that's my people, and I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Me too.
Where else are you going to be, Joe? Do you have any place besides Wisconsin you're going to be at in the next?
Yeah, I'll be in California, like around the 18th, 15th. I always give out the wrong date, but I'll be in California third weekish in May. I'm also going to the Florida State Convention in Lakeland, Florida. That's in June, I believe. And in July, I will be at Freedom Fest. I've never gone to Freedom Fest before, and I will be a speaker there.
Is that in South Dakota this year?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're having it in Mount
okay.
Rushmore. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So nothing like Rapid City in July. It could be warm. But it'll be fun. So, okay, well then I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Be sure to share the video when it comes up on your page with your friends so that more people get a chance to see this. And we'll see you all again on Sunday. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.